Good evening and welcome to the 5280 podcast. I'm Glenn Hauser, joined by Cameron Parker. Mundungus Creevy sounds like Froggy from the Little Rascals, so he is producing for us tonight. But we have a very special guest that was willing to pop in last minute and help us out tonight. If you've been a Broncos fan on social media, by now you've certainly been made aware of Broncos Avenue and all the noteworthy things they're doing on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and beyond. Our guest is also a recent addition to the predominantly orange lineup. And please welcome Amir Farrell.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate the invite and everything.
Go ahead, Cam.
So to start things off first with Broncos Avenue, I mean, just kind of talk to us first about that. Did you ever envision yourself like having a successful podcast like this, especially with where you are and with all the players and insiders that you certainly had on? Did you ever really envision it getting this big? I mean, because we all dream big, but like as far as kind of maybe how quickly it's kind of taken off.
I don't really think much about like what's going to happen too far into my future, even from a young age. Like everything. And I always take it just one day at a time, 1 week at a time, kind of try to chip away at my goals. I obviously looking at it now, seeing what I'm able to accomplish and, slowly chip away at these goals that I have in mind. I certainly think about what I want to do long-term in terms of, working for the NFL and all that. But, just a few years ago now, I wasn't really imagining this. It all started around like 2018, and I was just kind of really just doing it for fun. And that's not to say I'm not doing it for fun now, but I'm just certainly it's kind of like a one day thing at a time. And I always tell people like it's kind of like cliche, but you really should try to find ways every single day to improve yourself, even if it seems like it's not so easy to just get out of bed and do these simple things to improve, whether it's your graphic design or whether it's your coverage, whether it's whatever it is in terms of your, covering the Broncos in general. So that's just something I like to preach. And when you can, find how to do that, you're a dangerous person in terms of like how you can improve yourself.
No, that's great advice. So what was the thing? Can you pinpoint one moment where things really kind of took off?
Man, in terms of the podcast, definitely, it was more so the Tim Patrick interview, obviously for those of you that know about that. But just the Broncos Avenue brand, as I like to call it, there wasn't really a specific time. I would say more around like 2019, 2020, it started to take off a little bit. I think in 2021 or 2022, I hit 10K, and that's when I was like, okay, yeah, this could actually turn into something. I could turn this into, something just from just an Instagram account into what it is now today. And I see it going even like triple the times amount where it is right now. And even more than that. And so, yeah, I would say around like 10K on Instagram was kind of where I was noticing that people were kind of taking notice of my work, and obviously players following me, being able to talk to players is a huge thing. Like I never would have imagined, I know Cam asked that, I would never have imagined that starting this page. Getting to talk to a bunch of players is really, really cool. So that's kind of where I see things.
Yeah, it's funny, because I mean we've had the chance to interview players and stuff like that, and that's definitely something you don't take for granted, because it's like and it's something that you dream about it at such a young age, or even now, about interviewing some of these players, and to have that opportunity and interview them and talk to them about the Broncos or where they are, but like to kind of get to know them as a person is just, that's like the extra special part of this, is like
Exactly.
I have to ask you, considering I write for Predominantly Orange as well, and there's a billion other Broncos sites that are out there. So what was the appeal for you, Amir? Like as far as wanting to join Predominantly Orange, was it the fact that I write for them? Okay, I mean that might have been too much, but yeah. What was it? What was it?
No, that's a great question. I love that question. I was on the Crush Pod a few weeks ago, and they asked the same thing. And I'm gonna always give my credit to him. Jordan Lopez, one of the best, people out there. Seriously, like on the internet, I can't give enough credit to him. I've had him on the podcast a few times, but he actually took notice to me because of like a Jerry Judy edit I made on my Instagram, and Judy liked it, and he shared it on my Twitter and was like, "Hey, I'm a writer for Predominantly Orange. Just want to say you're killing it over there, man." That was basically it. Just say, give my flowers a little bit, and I really, really appreciated that. And so, one of my goals was to become a writer for any Broncos site, just to get my name out there. And after I took notice of that goal, that's when I was kind of like, okay, where can I find my best like landing spot, destination, as you can call it. And just looking at all the exchanges that I've had on Twitter from all the writers in the PO community, it's great people. I've obviously watched the Locked On Broncos podcast for like 2 years now, and Sarah Bedinger is an awesome person. And those two right there, Sarah Bedinger and Jordan Lopez, helped me out so much, with the application process and just giving me advice. And then one of my close friends, Shay, if he's listening to this podcast, and he I'll make sure he will, he gave me a lot of help, advice through that whole application process and being able to become a writer for the Broncos. So I definitely have to give those three people right there a lot of credit. And just overall, the Predominantly Orange, everybody knows what Predominantly Orange is if you're a Broncos fan. Like Mile High Sports, Predominantly Orange, those are, like, in my opinion, like the two biggest sites when I look at. And you got like the Broncos Wire, but yeah, those are like the biggest sites. So be able to be on a team like that with the writers of the caliber that we have, definitely a pleasure. And I'm definitely humbled by being able to be on a team like that.
So who was the first player to follow you, and who was the first player to guest on your pod?
Oh man. First player to follow me. I should know this. It's either his name was Joseph. I can't remember. He was a linebacker. He mainly played special teams. He went up and playing for the Bucks. I don't know. I don't know why I can't remember his name.
Joe Jones. Yeah.
Joe Jones. Yeah. They call him the family man.
Yep.
He was one of the first people that followed me for sure. Mike Purcell was one of the first players as well. Yeah, I think those are the two players. I remember my first ever like, though. I don't know why I specifically remember this, but it was like one of my first ever posts. It was Cody Latmer liked one of my posts. That was really, really, really cool. I loved him at the time for that, simply because of that like. But and then one of my first podcast guests was I believe it was who was it? Deshaun Williams. It was Deshaun Williams. I had him on the pod again last year for a second time, and man, he is, bro. I am telling you, he is like the nicest, uplifting family guy you'll ever meet. And just to talking to him like off the recording and through DMs and everything, he is genuinely like an incredible person. Deshaun Williams, he's like probably the nicest player I've ever talked to.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think we're actually really going to miss him this year. What do you think about that?
Yeah, definitely. We were just talking about this on the pod. Like, you can only hope that Matt Henningsen and Yuma Awazurike can live up to what he was there on the defensive line. And I know they just picked up PJ Musfer, the D tackle from Penn State, as undrafted free agent, and they're kind of looking to fill that more in like a cheaper route, just like they did with Deshaun Williams. He's obviously 30 years old, and he said he was getting a little buzz from George Payton about a potential return, but ultimately he ends up and goes with Ejiro Evero to Carolina. And I'm really happy for him. He gets the continuity there with his defensive coordinator. We've had like a million different coordinators here in Denver. It's just not right for the players. And to him to go to a team that like the Panthers, who in my opinion probably improved the most from like an organization standpoint across the NFL, I'm really happy for him. He deserves the best, and he got the money that he deserved. So
yeah, he was certainly one of those underrated contributors for sure. And he kind of put himself like within that same like conversation a few years back with Mike Purcell, because Mike Purcell was always so underappreciated, and like that same conversation, Deshaun Williams was truly that guy. And you definitely do feel happy for him, because I mean, like, if you think back to what it was, I think his first stint was with Vance Joseph, if I'm not mistaken, or Vic Fangio. And then he left and went to the Bengals, and then came back, to the Broncos. And so like his most successful years, if you're really being completely honest, was with Denver, and so to kind of see him finally get his due and go after that comfortability, like you said, to Carolina it's a big deal for sure.
So Amir, I think one of the things that people love about Broncos Avenue is the frequency with which you post, and your edits, your graphics are beautiful. Since you actually have a regular life outside of that, how do you balance getting those posts out there as quickly as you do? And do you have any funny stories about maybe scrambling around or trying to get one in when you're in an inopportune moment?
Oh man, that's definitely something you gotta work around and find. And there's just some times where I simply can't get to it, and they'll have to simply just be okay with the story post 2 or 3 hours later after it happens, rather than just the immediate post. But I've been trying to do as great as a job as I can, and I hope that people are satisfied with that. Recently, I've been a lot more busy in 2023. That's for certain. But funny stories. I was in the bathroom when the Russell Wilson trade happened. That happened. So that was certainly interesting. I had to wrap that up real quick, but other than that, no stories really stand out. That was definitely one. I was like working out during the Sean Payton trade, and then that happened like 5 minutes later. I was mad that I wasn't like right on it, but other than that, no other really stories pop out.
Yeah,
that's great, man. So I gotta ask, like, kind of transferring into this the draft talk, if you will. It was a fascinating draft. Like, it was such a fascinating draft because the Broncos still had 5 picks. Like, they finished with 5 picks, but they did some maneuvering. They went up and down, and and so it was kind of like a one that, with all that maneuvering that they did, it kind of made it seem like, oh, they're kind of collecting all this capital. Well, as it turned out, they still stayed with their 5 picks. So it was kind of like a fascinating draft at that, to where you kind of got a bit of everything with both Sean Payton and George Payton with what they wanted to do in the draft.
Yeah, for sure. And I said going into the draft, I thought they were going to come out with 7 picks, and they made 3 total trades and still had the 5 original players selected, which was definitely interesting to me. Jordan, our co-host for the Broncos Avenue podcast, I mean, he called it. He said we were going to trade up for a wide receiver. It happened. That it's just the big thing to me was like, I expected a trade up, but I didn't expect 2 trade ups. And then the only trade down we had, we still, it was for a player, and then we still only had that 1 pick in the 7th round. So I don't even consider that a trade down, honestly. But I'm still happy with that outcome. But yeah, I was definitely surprised. You can tell just immediately, and I wrote an article on this. The whole philosophical approach, for the draft is just a complete 180 to what George Payton has done in his first 2 years as a GM. And quite frankly, I honestly kind of like it. I like the aggressiveness. I'm one of those guys that does like to build draft picks and kind of use that as potential ammo in case, like, let's say a star player next year asks for a trade. It's like, what can we really offer? Next year, our capital looks decent. I would have liked to add more picks. I know that that trade with the Seattle Seahawks, they snagged that 2024 third, which kind of hurt a little bit. I wouldn't call it robbery, but it was definitely I wasn't too fond of the trade necessarily. But yeah, I definitely agree with you there that the whole philosophy was just completely flip-flop from what we've seen in previous years.
So why don't we start with right from the top? So they trade up. Originally, we had picks 67 and 68 in the 3rd round. The Paytons decided that we needed to scoot up to pick 63 in order to get Marvin Mims Jr. With that, we traded the 68th and the 138th to Detroit for the 63rd and the 183rd. Mims Jr., I mean, just almost 1,100 yards, 6 touchdowns just last year alone. First team All Big 12 player. 123 catches in his career for about 2,400 yards, averaged 19.5 yards per catch and 20 touchdowns. And I know he has the Emmanuel Sanders comparison. Everyone was excited about that screenshot, that graphic on the draft coverage. But on your podcast this week, you said that Jalen Waddle was your comparison, and you're thrilled about this.
Dude, I am so stoked. I'm like the biggest Jalen Waddle guy when it comes to not being a Dolphins fan. He is, like, in my opinion, on his way to be a top 10 receiver, if not like borderline, in my opinion, even with Tyreek Hill there. He's just like, the talent is off the roof. The speed is insane. Short area quickness. The ability after the catch is the biggest thing. And that's like such a big, preference per se in Sean Payton's offense. I feel like when you can get out in open space, Sean Payton's going to play you like every play. And that's going to ultimately put him up the depth chart. And I'm just really excited because I feel like I'm one of the only people that sees that on tape. And you give him the ball in short area space where all these highlights are showing him downfield making these catches. When you really dive into everything, you see him like making those little dump offs 5 yards. We saw that a lot with Teddy B in 2021. Imagine a guy like him in this offense in the short game and play action, just letting him do the work after the catch when you already established a run. That's a dangerous man right there. And I definitely see a lot of Christian Kirk and Jalen Waddle in his game, and I'm really excited for that.
So this wide receiver room, I'm sorry, Cam, like we have a lot of players in this room, but not a lot of veteran leadership. And people are talking about trading Cortland Sutton every 5 minutes. And I know you're not loving the Cortland trade talk. I mean, this guy's one of our captains. And like I said, he and Tim Patrick are the ones that really have the veteran leadership. If you had to guess right now, how many wide receivers make the roster and who would you think would be those wide receivers?
I would say that we just stick to like probably around the 6 that we typically see. And going back to the Cortland Sutton trade rumors every 5 minutes, we're completely contributing to that cause. I will take the guilt for that. Every episode, me and Jordan are like, yeah, so you guys know it's really possible Cortland Sutton could be traded, and he's over there saying, yeah, but before the season's up or season starts, I guarantee you Sutton's going to be gone. So I know people definitely hate us for that. We even put a clip out this morning of us debating on should we trade Sutton for Dalvin Cook, which is just completely unrealistic, but doing what we got to do. But anyways, yeah, the 6, I definitely could see like the 6 wide receivers making the roster. I wouldn't sleep on Dallas Daniels, the wide receiver out of Jackson State. I'm not really I wouldn't say I'm gambling on that to happen, but I'm not saying, I wouldn't sleep on that for sure. He could have a good camp. You never know. Jalen Virgil, don't sleep on him. He knows he has to prove himself again this camp and preseason. He was probably our best wide receiver in the preseason last year, hence why he made the 53-man roster. So I would say Sutton, Patrick, Judy, and yes, I do think Sutton's going to still be on the roster. Mims, KJ Hamler is one of those ones where if he even like gets the slightest injury in camp where he's like out for another few weeks after that torn pec, the odds are not in his favor at all. And I feel like Sean Payton, George Payton are really going to sit there and be like, is a healthy Jalen Virgil or a healthy Kendall Hinton more, crucial to this team and more contributing than KJ Hamler, who has a lot of potential, but he's probably going to be questionable every week or so. So that's definitely something to keep in your mind. I think he's definitely a cut candidate for sure. Kendall Hinton, I'm betting on him to make the roster again. Kendall Hinton's a beast. He slept on. He just does so much. He's so reliable in the receiving game, and he flashed a lot last year. I feel like not enough people talk about that. But yeah, those are kind of like the vicinity of definitely Callaway. He's making the roster. They didn't. Yeah, I feel like they didn't sign him just for him to not have at least a bit of a role in the offense. I think he's a good separator. Like I would not sleep on him at all in this offense.
I will admittedly say, like, this is the first time Amir's told me about, the Jalen Waddle. He blew up the chat that one day when they drafted Mims and he threw the Waddle in there. I did like the big eye raise, like Waddle, but it's funny. Like when I see Mims, like, it does feel like, if you were to talk about like some of the players that were put on notice a little bit, it was definitely KJ Hamler, or even friend of the show and sadly Montrell Washington, and that was another player certainly that's going to be flying under the radar or maybe one of those bubble candidates but I really do like Mims, and so I may not necessarily go with the Waddle comparison, but like one of the guys that I really thought I saw was kind of like the blend. It was brought up obviously Emmanuel, but like I thought it was like a Brandon Lloyd, or not. Brandon Lloyd, a little bit like with where he is at the catch point, and then also like a Brandon Cooks, the guy that like, Sean Payton has, dealt with and handled for a majority of his career. And he's done so well. And so, but yeah, he's definitely one that, it's going to be interesting to see what he does. Cause I would not be surprised to see him move up the depth chart. I wrote an article about that, over at Predominantly Orange. And another guy that I think is going to surprise a lot of people, and actually these next few picks, I should say, this pick and the next pick, I think are going to surprise a lot of people. And that is Drew Sanders. What did you feel about, Drew Sanders? Because there's so much to certainly make about, taking off-ball linebackers or, those types of linebackers. What was your take initially when they took Drew Sanders? Because some people felt like even the Draft Network felt like he was the best linebacker overall.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think I had him as my linebacker one in this class. I didn't dive into like the late portion of it around like after round 4, but he's one of those guys I really, really thought he would go like the last few picks of the first round or early day 2 at very minimum. So I mean, initially seeing that pick, I was like, wow, they actually went with a linebacker here, which, prior to the draft, I was preaching, do not take linebacker, quarterback, do not take those positions. But to get Drew Sanders, I mean, can you really argue with that? Especially a guy who can rush a passer very effectively. One of my very closest friends lives in Arkansas, and he goes to a lot of the home games. And man, he said a lot of great things about Drew Sanders, and then Ricky Stromberg I was really hoping for in the draft. But yeah, Drew Sanders, man, just he can get to the passer, and he finally got his opportunity. We were talking about this. He finally got his opportunity at Arkansas after being a 5-star recruit at Alabama. I mean, that he was a 5-star recruit for a reason, and he showcased his talent last year and his versatility. Vance Joseph's going to have a lot of fun with that because we've seen him in Arizona and Denver. He likes to move his linebackers around. He's not going to just simply have those guys sitting back in coverage or doing whatever, typical 3-4 defenses or signing those linebackers to do. He likes to move his players around and kind of fit what's best for the defense. So I think Drew Sanders is one of those guys that Vance Joseph's definitely going to have fun with. And I'm excited by the pick because just from a value standpoint, you got potentially a first rounder in the 3rd round. I mean, can you really argue with that? So I'm happy with the pick.
All right, just some stats about Sanders. 6'4", 235. We got him with our original pick, the 67th. Had 103 tackles last year, 13.5 for loss, but the 9.5 sacks. I mean, where do you think he could be a starter for this team right out of the gate, or just during the season a little bit, see more action as the season progresses?
Yeah, well, I mean, considering we're a 3-4, I wouldn't, imagine him being a full down, like 3 down, even 2 down starter off the bat. I definitely could see him being as like one of those crucial like 3rd down players, maybe early in their career in the rookie season. But I would not sleep on him. It's very early prediction, but I would not sleep on the team maybe letting Josie walk depending on what he demands out of his contract. And Drew Sanders is a starter with Alex Singleton next year. I mean, it depends on how much Josie's going to ask, but that's going to be a lot of money going to the linebacker position. And if you have some faith and you're really happy with the production Drew Sanders gives you after year 1, I mean, you got to at least kick the tires and see what he gives you after that year. And then if he doesn't pan out, then maybe a Jonas Griffith, is promoted to a starter there, and you kind of have like a 1-2 there, with an established Alex Singleton. So the NFL players are always moving up and down the depth charts. So it's kind of hard to guess right now, but Drew Sanders, he's a really good player. The reason he kind of fell was more so because of, I know Jordan Lopez pointed this out. He had a 19% missed tackle percentage. So teams are kind of like, is he going to be a very effective, linebacker in the middle of the field, or is he one of those guys who are going to have to rush the passer, just move him to a full-time edge? I know the Broncos kind of played around with Baron Browning before finally realizing that he is meant to be an edge rusher in the NFL. So I hope they kind of get this right. I've seen a lot of people call him a white Micah Parsons. So who knows? Maybe they kind of use him in maybe a role like that here in Denver, but I'm excited to see what they do with him. I think he's going to be a baller.
You just mentioned Jonas Griffith. He joined you on your show. What was that experience like?
He's a really nice guy. He's one of those guys that he's very respectful leading up to the show. He's, introducing himself, giving us kind of our flowers, and even after the show, talk to us. But yeah, just talking to him, he's like a very, professional guy. He has a lot of goals for as well. He's very determined. That was the biggest thing to me. I like when a player, shows how determined they are, how great they want to be. That's like the biggest thing that stands out to me in players. Like, where is your mind at? Like, where do you see yourself, this season, and what are your goals? And you can just tell he's one of those guys that goes about his business, and he wants to prove people wrong this year, because people are kind of knocking him a little bit for his injuries, or they're just simply forgetting about him altogether. Jonas Griffith, he's one of those guys when the linebackers got injured, especially Josie Jewell, he stepped in and played some damn good football. So Jonas Griffith, I certainly would not rule him out of the rotation this year, even with Drew Sanders picked in the third.
Yeah, I was going to say that there's like two of the biggest takeaways I thought for me was like, one, the linebacker room with the addition of Drew Sanders is better for 2023. Obviously, you can't really predict the future, but it's definitely the linebacker depth of what you have is so much better than what you certainly have had in years past, and given the injuries and everything. So yeah, hats off to the Broncos for doing that. And also to the Baron Browning point, this actually allows you to focus Baron Browning at the edge if you decide to put Drew Sanders on the inside and have him on an inside linebacker, which, to what Jordan did mention, which was about his missed tackle percentage, it's like, if he's a downhill player and a really good downhill player to where, he can tackle better, he feels more, that's more of, I guess, the pass rush type of style in him. Maybe that's kind of why the Broncos view him as that inside linebacker. I think he would do quite well in that. And so maybe that's one of the reasons why they kind of view that as the Josie Jewell insurance, because in case they do move on from Josie.
So Amir, our third pick of the draft, you alluded to the trade, and just to kind of highlight what happened, we came back into round 3 for pick 83. We traded the 108th overall and a 2024 third rounder to Seattle for that pick. Now, I think a lot of people were up in arms about giving up a third rounder next year. It really boils down to essentially giving up a 4th round pick to do this, in essence, because a third for a third. But do you think that the brushback, a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's Seattle, and even they were goofing on us? Their social media team was goofing on the Broncos after the trade was announced.
Yeah, their Twitter account, they think they're funny right after that. I saw that. Yeah, let's just see the Seahawks fan base is just getting annoying at this point. I kind of try to ignore any of that that's put out there. But yeah, you did make a good point. Like, you swap 3rd round picks. It's really that 4th rounder that's going to kind of, have Seahawks and Broncos fans debating over for the next year. If Riley Moss struggles in year 1, like a lot of rookie corners do, when you expect that, it's easily the second hardest position in football to play. He's going to have his moments where he struggles. So that's going to be something that's talked about this year easily. I know the Seahawks fans like to chirp. So yeah, that's definitely something Broncos fans should expect.
Right. So that pick was Riley Moss, cornerback from Iowa, 38-game starter for the Hawkeyes. So a lot of experience, in big-time college football, 11 career interceptions and 3 pick sixes. So what do you expect from him this season?
What do I expect from him this season?
Mm-hmm.
So this season, I'm looking more at the Damari Mathis PS2 duo. I'm not really expecting him to be, coming to be a crucial contributor right away. But just like Drew Sanders, he's going to be one of those guys that's in and out of the rotation, just for the coaching staff to see the flashes and what you can get out of him in certain plays. And once you feel very comfortable in what he's like, facing in the NFL, you could potentially look at him maybe down the line having a more increased role there, in and switching in and out with Damari Mathis. And I know Sarah Bettinger alluded to this. He could play nickel corner. He can. And I know K'Wan Williams has had his fair share of injury issues. Maybe they, and saying Bassey, no disrespect to him, but he was a little underwhelming, I would say, last year. So Riley Moss, I would like to see what he can potentially bring to the nickel spot. You can never have enough good corners on your team. So this pick, I like it a lot from just just a standpoint of not making all the pressure on Damari Mathis. I know PS2 can handle that, but we don't really know what Damari Mathis is going to be in Vance Joseph defense just yet.
Yeah, he's such a fun player because I think that, like, people just don't think as far as, those types of athletic players, but like he is an athletic and versatile gem. And I think that that's why probably a lot of people were kind of skeptical of, like, where would he fit? Is he going to be, is he going to be that nickel corner? Is he going to even be an outside corner, or which has been the publicity, once he was drafted, like, is he going to be a safety, and so that was like even some talk. But I think that that's like the best thing for you is, like, Riley Moss gives you that athleticism, the instincts and versatility to play anywhere that you really put him, and he's going to do quite well. So yeah, I'm really kind of curious. But when you do watch a Riley Moss, what was the thing for you that stood out for you?
Just like you said, the athleticism. His athleticism is crazy. His speed is crazy. He has the experience at track. He ran track, and the speed is just off the charts. The athleticism. When you look at a player like that, I think he was a 9.66 relatively athletic score, which I'm a huge fan of the RAS scores. That was something a lot I took note of in the pre-draft process. Just that, like I said, the athleticism. I can't talk enough about it. He was one of seriously the best athletes in this entire class. The stats show it, the tape shows it. He can fly off the line. He can play zone, which is a big thing. Zone coverage is really, really good. And we need a ball hawk in this defense, I feel like, especially at the corner position. Last year, our turnovers in terms of interceptions did go up with Avero as expected. But this year, I would like to see it. You can only hope that it stays around that number. And getting a guy like Riley Moss, maybe he can, towards the end of the season with increased playing time, can get you a few interceptions in key games. So especially in rival games, that would be huge for us. Those turnovers and especially interceptions in the secondary, it's always, I feel like, Justin Simmons. I would like to see some of these corners start getting that work done as well. And Riley Moss, I think he's the guy to do it for you. So I think just in terms of what popped out the most to me with him is just the ball hawking ability and in zone coverage, and then it's just athletic ability after those interceptions as well. I mean, he's gonna jump around a little bit and get some return yards for you as well.
That hurdling video is insane.
Yeah, it is.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So Broncos fans had to wait another 100 picks before our fourth choice of the draft, but this one is a popular one. It really seems to. It's like a lot of people are saying it's their favorite pick of the draft. So pick 183, JL Skinner, safety from Boise State, gets selected by the Broncos. He got a pec injury in February. Surgery in March, and he says he's going to be about a month away from being cleared. Dane Brugler from The Athletic rated him the sixth best safety with a round 3 or 4 anticipated draft position, and we get him in the 6th round. What are your thoughts?
I'm really happy by the pick. At first, I really did not expect. And I was talking early on, don't draft quarterback, linebacker, and safety was kind of one of those ones where, like, I was okay with it being in the 6th round because, I mean, 6th and 7th round is you're just kind of throwing darts at that point. You're really hoping to find like a gem, and he's one of those guys, like you mentioned, he tore his pec, so his draft stock was going to fall, and he ultimately did to us at 183. And I think that this is a great landing spot for him. You talk about Justin Simmons learning behind him. He has experience at free safety. He's very versatile. He can line up in the box for you. Something that a lot of Broncos fans I've seen have been saying that they want the people that do want Kareem back. They're saying they want him in the box, and JL Skinner can be exactly for you, and you don't have to bring Kareem back for that reason. And I'm really excited to see what he brings us. I'm excited to see how he looks after that torn pec in camp and what he can do. I'm expecting him to be one of those big winners at training camp. In my opinion, he's one of those guys I'm definitely going to be watching closely, because I expect the decision to be made pretty soon about Kareem Jackson and if they want to bring him back or not. So after that, I'm really curious to see what kind of role he's going to play in this defense, because if we don't bring K-Jack back, he's ultimately going to have to be like a downhill run stopper for us in year one, even though he's a 6th round pick in my opinion. I love PJ Locke and those guys, but as a group, that whole safety room, especially with no disrespect to Caden Stearns, the injury concerns they're still there and are floating around. So that whole entire safety room alongside Justin Simmons, they're gonna have to step it up this year.
Yeah, when you do look at the safety room, it almost feels, and you mentioned about Kareem, it almost feels like the draft pick of JL Skinner, without them saying we're going to potentially move on from Kareem Jackson. That's enough of saying potentially that they may be moving on from Kareem Jackson. He mentioned, I believe it was like after he was taken, or during the process, that one of the guys that he modeled his game after was Cam Chancellor. And and when you look at that size at 6'3", 6'4", and the way that he can lay the lumber and the way that he can play is you can definitely understand the comparisons. And it's one that, in this day and age, you really don't see those kinds of safeties anymore. Except for, say, some of the rangier safeties, if you will, like the freak athletes, like what we've seen from Kyle Hamilton getting drafted to the Baltimore Ravens. But do you see that kind of comparison? Because it does seem like a little bit of it's a high praise, but you can kind of see the glimpses of a Cam Chancellor and a JL Skinner.
I have to do extensive more amount of work on Skinner, but that is a very stark comparison. But the thing I love about that is, like, you don't want to compare yourself to some. I don't want to disrespect anybody, but I love the fact that he's comparing himself to an all-time legend, as all the highlight reels of like some huge hit sticks and plays in the secondary as well. And I absolutely love that. I mean, you want to shoot for greatness, and when you're comparing yourself to someone like Cam Chancellor, in that Seattle secondary, that's something you absolutely love to see. I mean, there was like the PFF college tweet of the quote where he was like, "If you come around me, you're gonna get hit, and I want you to fear me." And that's like, whoa, like as someone like that, I mean, that's just really, really cool to see. And that's someone that makes you that kind of mentality makes you more comfortable moving on from Kareem Jackson. And he was a big leader at Boise State. That's something that's not talked about enough. You see all the coaches and the highlights as well, and everything in terms of interviews. He just has that like leadership aura that he carries with him, and he's someone that's going to be a big voice, in my opinion, in just year one. Despite having some veterans in the room like Caden Stearns and PJ Locke, I think he's going to be one of those guys that's contributes right off the bat. This is like one of the probably like our best value pick.
So our last pick of the day was pick 257 in round 7, and we received that as a result of a trade with the Saints. We gave up our one of our 6th round picks for that 7th round choice, and Adam Troutman, the tight end that Sean Payton had drafted in the 3rd round a few years back. What was your thought with that trade? And can you really figure out what's going on in that tight end room? And I mean, he doesn't even mention anything about Dulcich. It's very interesting. What are your thoughts?
It's very, very interesting. Sarah Benninger has talked about it. Cody Rourke and them on the Locked On Broncos. It's like that when anytime they were asked about, the tight end room and how they evaluated that position. And he basically just said it looked like, I don't think he said it looked ugly, but he was just like talking about how it wasn't very fun to watch that, position on tape. But I thought it was super interesting because I thought Greg Dulcich looked fine in the limited amount of time that he played last year, especially for a rookie. I mean, I wouldn't expect too much out of him. I don't know if that was a smokescreen or not, but apparently it wasn't, because they ended up taking like you mentioned, trading for Adam Troutman, the guy that he has experience coaching with in New Orleans. So Troutman, you're getting an all-around player. He can block both in the run and pass game. But he can also flip out on a few plays, whether it's a screen action or some dump offs. As it's a receiving tight end, a lot of fans have been talking. The biggest question I get is always about Albert O. He's like really the odd guy out right now. It just feels like nobody's talking about him in the media. He's just one of those guys that's just out of the equation. It feels like I know Russell Wilson. It was Albert O's birthday a few days ago, and he kind of mentioned on his story. He was like happy. He wished him a happy birthday, and he was like, "Big year coming up for you, Albert O." So maybe they have some big plans for him in 2023. Who knows? But yeah, like you mentioned, I'm right there with you guys. It's very hard to make out what's going down in that tight end room. I wouldn't say it's a big reach to say that Adam Troutman's the week 1 starter. I find that trade really interesting. That was one of the moves that was probably like my least favorite. Adam Troutman, I mean, you're getting another guy in the tight end room that makes it, more of a reliable and reliable asset to Russell Wilson. But Greg Dulcich, one of those guys I was really high on, so I was a little shocked by that. And I saw Zach Kuntz waiting there as well. I know Cam knows that we were all in the chat praying for Zach Kuntz there at 195, and it didn't happen. So I was a little ticked off by that, but I guess they got the tight end that they like, so I'm happy that they got the guy that they wanted. So
the pick we did make a couple picks before the Mr. Irrelevant, Alex Forsyth, center from Oregon, a 3-year starter, 6'4", 303. What was your impression of that choice, and were you glad that they went center with the last pick?
Yeah, the last pick was one of those like kind of toss ups. It was like I believe like the third or fourth to last pick in the draft, and so I was like center, edge. I wouldn't even minded corner there. Like I didn't really care too much what that last pick was, but the fact that they got Alex Forsyth, like I know Jeff Schwartz literally said on his Twitter that he's going to be a starter for 10 or he's going to be playing in the NFL for 10 years. I mean, that's something huge to say coming from a vet that played 8 years in the NFL and was also a former 7th round pick. So that was really, really cool to see. I saw some analysts even saying that he was their number 1 center in the class. So to get him that late was really cool. And that's one of those picks that you can't really, if some people didn't like center's last pick, I mean, you can't really be too mad by that because it was one of the last picks in the draft. He was basically like an undrafted free agent at that point. So, but I was really happy to see that. I mean, he is like, we talked on in the pod. I feel like his run blocking is like underrated. Like people hate on it a little bit too much, in my opinion. He's one of those guys that can do it, not only in the run game and the pass game. He kind of specializes in both, in my opinion. It's just going to be coming down to the injuries with him.
This was another case, I feel like, with, we talked about the philosophy earlier, with this team. This one, like, truly was a rare one because, we mentioned about throwing darts in that 6th and 7th round, right? But, like, as you said, it's like it was such a weird one because it was like this felt like they were throwing a dart, but also like it was addressing a need, and
yeah, that's true.
And so it was one that like, and to be fair, I feel like, if you look at some of the history, the center position, you do tend to get much better centers much later on in the draft, versus, say, drafting a Lloyd Cushenberry in the 3rd round or just a Cesar Ruiz that the Saints did. Should I say in the 1st round, who might actually end up being, say, a center, a player that gets, floated out there in a trade. But, yeah, it's definitely interesting. And it's one that has a lot of Bronco fans wondering because, it was one that like, he definitely seemed like a player that could have in the Jalen Skinner mode be drafted a little bit higher. So do you view him, Amir, like in the same vein as some of the Bronco fans do, which is, here's another case where he could potentially be a starter or see some playing time in year 1?
I think he can be that. He has that potential, but ultimately he did fall for a reason. And then number 2, the injuries, and then number 3, I think he can have that potential to be the week 1 starter simply because Lloyd Cushenberry, in my opinion, is not the greatest center. And I'm not going to say that he's not going to have a great training camp and show everybody wrong, which I hope he does. I mean, he was our 3rd round pick, so I hope he can live up to that. And we still have him on that rookie contract, but I just want the best man to win the job. The best, Jordan, what's up, man? The best man to win the job here. But yeah, Forsyth, Kush, I'm just hoping the O-line protection needs to be better for Russ. At the end of the day, I don't care who it is. At least we didn't pay top dollar to this guy. And if we can come away with one of these guys on like a very cheap contract and they're a very, valid starter for us, that's a win in my opinion. That's another, like I mentioned, another great value pick. No Walmart joke intention there, but another great value pick for the Broncos there late in the draft.
So before, go ahead.
I want to tie a knot on the whole wide receiver discussion because that was a huge thing even during the draft. Well, the Broncos decided to, without saying it, they went out and did it, over the draft. They didn't take they took Marvin Mims, obviously, but they went out and tied a bow on everything, made Jordan Lopez happy. That's why I'm wearing the Jerry Jeudy jersey, and went out and picked and picked up Jerry Judy's 5th-year option. I'm guessing, Amir, this was expected for you.
This was not expected. I
Oh.
am on camera saying this, so I'm not going to sit here and backtrack. But I really thought it was like I even said this on the pod. I thought it was so interesting how they brought up the 5th-year option during one of the press conferences. I can't remember if it was like after or before the draft, and they basically brought it up, and George Payne just did not answer it at all. Like he just kind of, I wouldn't say refused, but he just didn't answer it. And then Sean Payton just kind of like went off subject, kind of went off track from the question. So that honestly, it fooled me. So they got me there. That's something Sean Payne's been doing a hell of a job so far with. Has definitely been fooling the media. So he got me on that one. But ultimately, it doesn't matter because Jerry Jeudy, my opinion, going to be one of the best wide receivers in football. I'm so happy they made the right decision. Like Bawana says there, $13 million in 2024. No brainer in my opinion. He's going to be a dog this year, wide receiver 1. I'm predicting like a minimum 1,100 yards this year, even with the addition of Marvin Mims.
So what do you think happens behind the scenes with that? Do they tell Jerry that they're going to pick it up, but we're just going to wait till after the draft? Or do they just leave him hanging? What kind of I just always wonder what the receiver is thinking. I mean, to many of us, it seemed like it should be an automatic if you didn't bother trading him for any capital. But to wait for the day before deadline, I was just it was an interesting choice.
Yeah, you can really sit there and debate all the circumstances in that situation. I think honestly they didn't tell him like right away, just by judging off the reaction he had on Instagram. He was like very, very excited and happy about it. I was very it was kind of heartwarming to see that he was posting his bedroom that he had back when he's living with his coach, and it was really just cool to see that he appreciates the journey he's had to get to where he is, and he's going to be making $13 million, and just his it's going to be like his 5th season in the NFL when he earns that. But yeah, just going off everything, I think they didn't tell him initially just because all the options were still on the table heading into that draft. So it's like you tell him that you're going to pick up your 5th-year option, but then you also trade him on draft day, which I don't think they were anticipating, but you never really know. All like George Payne always says, we've heard him say it a million times, all options are always on the table. We're open to trading up, trading down, and kind of moving anybody on the, I wouldn't say anybody on the roster, but he's one of those guys that ultimately was one of the core players that George Payne did move on from, and they pick up his 5th-year option, and deservingly so.
So before we talk about some of the other news in Broncos country, there were 16 undrafted free agents that the Broncos signed. We also have some mini camp invitees that the names have trickled out as well. Pro Football Talk referenced, the idea of maybe expanding the draft, to the 8th or 9th round, perhaps. So there's less frenzy around the undrafted free agent signings. What would your thought be on something like that?
Yeah, someone said that to me today, and I was so excited. Like, I don't know the validity to that, but if you guys know me, I'm a huge draft guy. So to be able to get the gift of being able to sit down and watch another 64 picks would be absolutely sensational. I don't care if they're not the most talented guys out there. When realistically, I mean, these guys are the most talented football players in the world. So I mean, they're in this game for a reason. So that would be really cool to see. And like you mentioned, it makes things easier on the UDFA process. I mean, it's kind of like a mayhem in terms of like who's getting this player, who's getting that player. It's really comes down to money, honestly, and where the players feel like it's the best fit. So I think it'd be really cool to add, potentially 8th or 9th round. That's just more draft for me. So that would be awesome.
Now, you mentioned Dallas Daniels, a wide receiver from Jackson State earlier. Were there any other names that really stood out for you on that signing?
In terms of like all the signings,
the undrafted free agents.
Jaleel McLaughlin is someone that's probably I'll be betting on out of all those guys, like him and PJ Musfer. I'm putting my very early bet on them making the 53-man. Jaleel McLaughlin, he had like some crazy stats. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but he did really, really well there at Youngstown State. They also signed Emmanuel Wilson out of Fort Valley State, another running back. yeah, those are kind of the guys I'm placing my early bet on. I know Thomas Incoom, I think his name is, the defensive end that they signed. Probably, I think this was their very first signing. A lot of people and analysts are saying that he's like the best signing so far. I think I even saw on like CBS Sports they gave us like the ninth best signing in terms of undrafted free agents in the entire NFL with him. So some people apparently think he's really good. I think he was getting like some early 7th round projection. So it seems like the Broncos struck potential gold with him there.
What do you know about Houston cornerback Art Green? He got 170,000 guaranteed, which generally indicates that there's a lot of competition to get him. Do you know anything, or do you know much about Art?
Yeah, I do. I was actually talking to him today. He's a really, really cool guy. All I'm going to say is stay tuned for the Broncos Avenue podcast in terms of Art Green. But anyways, Art Green's a baller, man. Jordan, he actually attends the University of Houston. So that's one of the guys that we're excited to have on the show. But yeah, he's a baller, man. We had a lot of pre-draft interest in him. They even flew him in to I think it was like a tour of the facility or just like a simple pre-draft visit. But yeah, they actually had some significant interest in him. He's like 6'2", around over 200 pounds. He's a lengthy guy. He plays long just like his size is, and that's something I like a lot. I know Broncos fans like a lot with PS2. So you wouldn't hate having one of those guys, and that's another one of those guys. I'm glad you brought him up. I would be betting on him to be like in that last slot for the cornerback room, potentially the second to last slot. In terms of how the depth chart unfolds come week 1.
So one of the fun exercises, obviously, with the draft is anticipating the contributors, or like the starters, if you will, like significant contributors from this draft. Do you view this as potentially that the Broncos have, 5 contributors, or do you see this as a case of like maybe just 1 or 2 in the case of, or even 3 in the case of Riley Moss, down to Drew Sanders and Marvin Mims? For how do you kind of see the draft shaping up as far as maybe into the future, or just even to this year?
Yeah, I fully expect Riley Moss to be a starter in the future with us. I expect him to run more like DB packages where you could potentially see Mathis, Moss, and PS2 all at the same time on the field. Maybe he turns out to be a really good nickel corner for us. Who knows? I definitely expect him to be here long term as a starter. He's one of those guys that just a lot of people are obviously for his skin color, people are kind of making a joke of the pick right now. But I think that is completely out of the water. That does not matter. He can play ball. Like I've said a million times already, he's a very athletic player, very, very athletic player, and that's super important at the cornerback position, especially. So Drew Sanders, 100% expect him to be a starter. And those, like I always say, in those first 3 rounds, you're drafting you're drafting players to be starters. You're not drafting them to be, just incumbent. Just players that like are potential like borderline starters for you over the first few years of their career, and just walk on their rookie contracts afterwards because you believe in your other players. You just Drew Sanders, Riley Moss, expect them to be starters. Marvin Mims, obviously he's going to be, I believe he's climb his way to be like an effective starter this year. I'm expecting him like 600 to 700 yards in year 1 for him, despite people thinking it's like a crowded room. Then other than that, Alex Forsyth, like I mentioned, is kind of like a toss-up. J.L. Skinner, I expect him to be one of those guys that's like steps in right away and is like, I wouldn't say jumps PJ Locke, but he's going to be one of those guys that's like a crucial contributor, behind Caden Stearns and Jake Sims. So that's kind of where I'm looking at in this draft class. I hope I didn't miss anybody. I think that was the 5.
So what was your final grade on the draft?
A B+. I gave it a B+. Some people I saw like, I think it was CBS Sports gave us like a D+, just unbelievable. I don't understand when you get value like this and the talented players that we got with just 5 picks. I think you did a pretty good job. And Marvin Mims is like, I expected him to go like early day 2, and we got him like essentially the last pick of the second round, could have been a 3rd rounder. I think you could have like maybe they know more. They obviously know more than I do, but I don't even know if you had to trade up that far to get him. I feel like he would have fell a little bit farther, but who knows? But the value, I'm giving this draft a B plus. I think we're one of the best teams actually in the league in terms of getting draft value this past weekend.
So that draft room, and you just recently published an article on Predominantly about the Peyton and Peyton relationship and really who's in charge.
Yeah.
And in it, you referenced that we used to be getting the videos of the phone calls and, hey, let me get your coach. And, and we're not seeing any of that, oddly enough, but we are seeing the two of them doing their song and dance routine and spending like an hour with the press when they actually get in front of them. It's kind of weird how that's going on, but what do you think of that relationship? Do you think it's truly as collaborative as they say? I do. But what is your opinion?
I definitely do. And I said on the show with Jordan Lopez, and even in the article, I feel like it's like a kind of like a Batman and Robin thing. You have one of those guys that clearly is kind of like the alpha, leader and figure there. But it's also like a kind of like a duo, kind of like a group effort. I mean, our assistant general manager as well, Darren Mugia, I believe, is playing a part there as well. So I think it's a really solid trio and a good trio to have there. And if people think this is like a problem with those two guys in terms of who's making the ultimate decisions, I think it's a good problem to have. These are you talk about George Payne, one of the best scouts in the entire NFL. He's great at the draft, absolutely great. Just I think another year where he struck gold with another corner and all the value that he got, did a great job. And I don't think that was just Sean Payton. I mean, it was a group effort, and you can kind of alluded to this. It's kind of like a balance between the two philosophies. You talk about how George Payton's always like, yeah, I want to go into each draft with 10 picks, or obviously he traded for Russell Wilson and Sean Payton, so that was inevitable for it to just be the 5. But with what they did, I feel like it was a good balance and mixture of what the two philosophies have approaching the draft. And I think it's going to be a good problem to have if that makes any sense.
It does. Mark asked what our grades are. I'm with Amir. I'm at a B plus. Cam, where are you?
A plus. I'm kidding. No, I'm definitely in the agreement of the B plus range. I mean, there's probably a few areas where you can kind of nitpick, but that's kind of like where you get into like the gray area of versus like the trade of like the Riley Moss. Like, it isn't necessarily the draft pick of Riley Moss. It's what it took to get there, or even say, and Amir talked about it earlier, like the Troutman trade, like, so it's just kind of not necessarily the player. It's just kind of like how it all evolved to get there. So I would say, yeah, definitely within that B plus range.
But you can go so far to say that, Sean Payton is even part of this draft class, because we did trade Chubb for that first round pick that, we were able to use to secure Payton as well as the second. But, I think a great job all the way through. It was referenced in the chat, but today is the 40th anniversary of the biggest day in Broncos history as far as a transaction goes. John Elway was traded from the Baltimore Colts 40 years ago today. Some of us on this show were actually old enough to remember that day and what it did to change the state of Colorado and Broncos country. But Amir, what are some of your favorite Elway memories? I know he had retired even prior to your birth, but just as somebody that obviously respects Broncos history, give us some of your thoughts about John.
Favorite memory definitely has got to be drafting Jared Jeudy, because Jared Jeudy, just a baller. I mean, he's my second favorite player behind Javonte Williams, obviously. But John Elway, I mean, you talk about the helicopter, you talk about obviously the Super Bowls that we have with this franchise. Without him, we don't have that. I mean, we're probably sitting with some of these very low franchises out there. I mean, I would hate to, have that low of a kind of like a history in terms of the championship wins, the Super Bowls and everything. I was more around like the Peyton Manning era, obviously, hence my age. But yeah, John Elway, one of the all-time greats. You talk about the Mount Rushmore, he's definitely got to be the number one guy you instill there. And definitely will be very always thankful for him. And I was talking about on the pod like a few weeks ago after we got the news that he essentially stepped down, that too many people kind of like crap on him for his time as the Broncos general manager. And when you look at everything that he has brought to the table in terms of what he's done for this organization, there's no greater person in terms of how he's impacted this franchise from a player standpoint to his drafts, which are overhated. I mean, he couldn't draft a quarterback to save his life, but he did acquire a quarterback that ultimately brought us another Super Bowl and, appeared in another Super Bowl as well. So, he just like, I feel like a lot of the younger fan base as well. They kind of don't appreciate enough what John Elway did for this franchise. So definitely have a lot of respect for John Elway in terms of what he provided and did for this franchise. I mean, you look at him, Pat Bowen, Manning; those are like the greatest figures in Broncos history.
No doubt. Yeah. Real quick before we wrap up, you mentioned Javonte as being your favorite player. What is your prediction for him for this year?
Prediction for him this year. Got a big article coming out tomorrow morning actually about him. I'm really excited for that. Gonna be some definitely interesting stuff in there. You guys should check it out. But in terms of Javonte Williams' stat line, I'm expecting him to be like full health around I would say around week 5-ish, around there. I think they're going to kind of sprinkle him in, not put too much on him to start off the season. Sean Payton smart. They're just simply not going to, even if he's 100%, I feel like they're going to still take it a little bit easy and not really give him too much by around week 4. But in terms of the whole season, I think they're going to try to utilize that addition of Samaje Perine to their benefit. I think it's not going to just be the Javonte Williams show. So in terms of receiving yards, I don't picture too much for Javonte. I think that's going to be more of Perine on third down. In terms of running yards, I would say around the 800, 900 mark. But I'm not. Who's to say that he doesn't just go crazy next year and have over 1,000 on 5 yards a carry, something like that? Because he's ready to prove everybody wrong. Because everybody's kind of writing him off, saying, "Oh, trade for Dalvin Cook," or sign Kareem Hunt tomorrow. Everybody's kind of writing off Javonte. I feel like it's kind of one of those storylines that he's definitely taken notice of, and he's going to put his head down and, in my opinion, have a great year next year, even with bouncing back from a huge injury where he not only tore his ACL but multiple ligaments in that knee. That's something very, very difficult to come back from in a short period of time, in just a span of 12-ish months.
There's so much mystery about his health and his progress, do you think it's probably a good sign that we didn't, we let Latavius Murray go to the Bills and that we didn't sign him as insurance?
Yeah, I threw out that possibility of him potentially come back. Even I thought it would happen relatively soon after the draft, and simply didn't. It's really interesting how he was. I wouldn't say he recruited Sean Payton to the Broncos. That's just kind of a silly statement. But he did kind of throw out the messages there to him. We heard about that. They all talked about how him and Russ right after that Cardinals win, they messaged Sean Payton and kind of told him to come to Denver. And we saw the Pat McAfee show as well. You could clearly tell that him and Sean Payton are very close. So it was very interesting. I was very confident just by the body language that he would at least come back and be that running back 3, even a practice squad player. But ultimately, he is worth more than that. And what he did last year, I am very, very thankful and grateful for what he brought, because our offense, in terms of running the ball, I mean, you talk about not having a run over 20 yards all the way till week 15. I mean, that's just very, very ugly. And the fact that we signed him, after, or I think it was before that game in London against Jacksonville. I was really, really happy with what he brought to the table just midway through the season, and the whole sequence of events as well. I mean, he literally played in London, then has to fly all the way, to Denver or whatever, and then go right back. I mean, that's just crazy. So what a turn of events for him. But I'm really grateful for what he did last year. It's just kind of unfortunate that he didn't come back, but maybe they have a plan.
So two things for me. Why did it take Pat so long to finally contribute to the show this late into the show? That's kind of what I want to know. It took him till the last 5 minutes, but hey, that's just my 2 cents there. But the last one is he also mentioned about a Mims prediction, Amir. What would you say a decent Mims prediction would be for him? Are we gonna go bold? We gonna say 1,000 yards? What we feeling?
I'm sticking with my earlier statement. I think he rises up the depth chart and goes for like 600, 700 yards. I'll say like 700 yards. I think he has a really good year with Russell Wilson. I don't want to shoot it too high. I just feel like you talk about Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, Jerry Jeudy, and Marvin Mims. I mean, that's a lot of talent right there. So not all of those guys are going to go for over 700. There's going to be one or two of those guys that has kind of like a disappointing yard total there in 2023.
If we can get a rookie receiver at 700 yards, man, I would be thrilled. And I think most of Broncos country would be thrilled with your Javonte prediction as well. But Amir, I can't thank you enough for joining us. Like I said, last minute, hopping in, and one of the common thoughts that we're seeing in all these comments are just how many people are enjoying Broncos Avenue and also just excited for your success. I think, you certainly go about things the right way and so happy for you. But where can people find you, on the various platforms and you already teased your article for tomorrow.
Yeah, so Twitter is at Broncos Ave, just the Broncos AVE. Instagram is Broncos Avenue, just simply like that. Same thing for TikTok, and then YouTube, obviously, just Broncos Avenue. You guys can just look at Broncos Avenue, should pop up, and then just you can look up Amir Farrell on or at Predominantly Orange, and all my articles pop up there. I don't know when the article will be up tomorrow morning. I expect it to be around like 7 Mountain Time. But yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting one about Javonte Williams. I can't say I don't want to spill too much, but it's gonna tell a lot about kind of like his future for this upcoming season. So I'm really excited for that to come out, and it's a really big piece for me so far as a writer. So, but yeah, I thank you guys so much for letting me be on the show. Obviously, you guys are doing great work over here. This is a really fun show to be on. This is the conversation was always flowing. You guys know what you guys are talking about. I mean, it's just a very professional podcast. I appreciate being on things like this.
I appreciate that. Hold tight if you could, but when we wrap up, but you're watching the MHRT network. This is a 5280 podcast. Our other podcasts throughout the week. We have the Cluster Puck Avalanche podcast on Monday nights. We are obviously here on Tuesday nights. Sports Nonsense and Whiskey comes in about half an hour. So make sure you listen to them. Tomorrow we have the Wild Wild West, which features fans of each of the 4 teams battling it out. And then you'll see Cam again on the Mainly Broncos podcast on Wednesday nights. The BPA show is on Thursday. Friday has Broncos Breakdown, and the Avs losing killed the neighborhood, but we'll be back with the neighborhood come Broncos, the Broncos season, where we'll be doing some live shows, watching those games and such. So thank you for everyone for popping in the chat and joining us. We truly appreciate it. And again, thank you to Amir. We will see you next week.
Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no.